Everyone's excited about the Devil Wears Prada sequel, but watching the world romanticize Miranda Priestley again made me realize something. We've been telling the wrong story about this movie, because you probably believe that The Devil Wears Prada is about ambition, about selling your soul. But that's not what happened. Andrea didn't lose herself. She was psychologically manipulated into giving up every single part of her life for a job she didn't even care about to start off with. And it didn't happen overnight. It happened because Miranda slowly conditioned her to do so. This movie isn't really about fashion. It's about control, manipulation, and dark psychology of how certain people reshape you quietly until you don't even realize it's happening, while making you believe that you are choosing this for yourself. Welcome back to the Boss Babe Blueprint, and today we're breaking down the psychological tactics behind Miranda Priestley's manipulation techniques so you can spot them early and never fall into the same trap. But the irony is that Andy Sachs looks like the last person Miranda should be able to control. However, that's exactly why she was the perfect target. So, let's start off with the scene where Andy enters the runway for the very first time. She's confident, knows what she's good at, but most importantly, she doesn't care too much about this job. In fact, she's probably the only person in that entire office who doesn't. Remember this scene? With the way everyone is threatened by Miranda, one thing becomes clear. Yep, Miranda is the devil. But more than that, this job means everything to those working. But Andy stands there, completely unaffected. She is not impressed, nor intimidated, neither desperate for this job that might change her life. And it makes sense, because she doesn't value fashion. So naturally, one would think Miranda's manipulation techniques would not work on her. Because manipulation usually works on people who want something badly, and Andy doesn't. Then comes her first real conversation with Miranda, and to no one's surprise, Miranda dismisses her almost immediately. And right there, Andy could have walked away. She could have said, "Yep, you're right, this isn't for me. I don't care. Ciao, enjoy your stupid clothes." But she doesn't. Instead, Andy does something very telling. She says she may not care about fashion, but she is good at what she does. She lists her achievements, her intelligence, her competence, and when she did that, she unknowingly gave Miranda a superpower without realizing. Because now, Miranda understands that Andy isn't indifferent, she isn't lazy, she isn't unambitious. She is a high achiever who hates being underestimated. And that's when Miranda sees something far more useful than Andy's academic resume. She's capable, but hasn't been recognized by power yet. And that combination is gold for Miranda to control. Because Andy isn't driven by passion, she is driven by self-concept. And in psychology, what Miranda does next is called identity anchoring. She subtly ties Andy's self-worth to performance within her system. That's why Miranda gives Andy nearly impossible tasks and expects her to fulfill them. Because the unspoken message is, if you're as competent as you say you are, you'll rise to this. And that's why Andy doesn't quit when she's humiliated, nor walk away when she's dismissed. Instead, she works harder the less validation she gets. Because quitting would mean accepting, maybe I wasn't good enough. And for a high achiever, that's unbearable. But here's what most people misunderstand about Miranda. Miranda didn't manipulate Andy with the job title. She manipulates her by making the work feel bigger than herself. That's why the cerulean sweater scene matters so much. Andy thinks it's stupid and calls it just a blue sweater. But Miranda destroys her then and there. And in that moment, Andy realizes that the sweater wasn't about fashion. It was about an ideology. Suddenly, they weren't just arguing over shades of blue anymore. They were deciding what the entire world would wear that season. And the job Andy once saw as a shallow, materialistic, and obsessed with impossible beauty standards suddenly felt bigger than she ever imagined, even to someone who never valued fashion in the first place. And this tactic isn't unique to Miranda. A real-world version of this is the ideology Elon Musk sells to his employees. He doesn't just build cars, he builds cars that will save the planet. He doesn't just build rockets, he builds rockets that will save humanity. He doesn't buy a platform to run a company, he buys it to protect free speech. Whether you agree with him or not, that framing matters because it turns work into an ideology. And when you sell an ideology to a high achiever, especially one who wants meaning and mastery, they will tolerate pressure most people wouldn't. That's why Elon attracts top talent from around the world to work under extreme pressure, even when they could have better pay and work-life balance elsewhere. And they do this not because they're weak, but because they believe they're part of something way bigger. Well, sometimes that is true, but not every job is world-changing. Still, a lot of environments will sell you fake meaning just to manipulate you and perform over and above. That's why this isn't about avoiding manipulation, because at the end of the day, manipulation exists everywhere. The real power is seeing it clearly, understanding what's being sold to you, why does it work on you, and then choosing consciously whether you want to play it or not. But right after Miranda understands Andy's weakness, she doesn't go after it aggressively. She does something way more effective. She treats Andy like she barely exists. And I love how they kept this going even for this sequel. Miranda doesn't recognize anyone. It's funny, but it's also incredibly clever from a writing point of view, because they've softened Miranda's edges, making her more likable. Because in 2026, the old Miranda as a boss just wouldn't sit right with the audience. But she's still Miranda. She still doesn't care about anyone. She doesn't even remember them. It reminds me of a line I used in one of my Coco Mindset videos. I don't care what you think about me. I don't think about you at all. That is why, even after Andy genuinely starts caring about the job and molding herself to be the best employee there is, Miranda still doesn't even make eye contact with her most of the time. She gives no reaction, not even acknowledging the impossible tasks that she has fulfilled. And if you're a high achiever, this breaks you. Because people like Andy don't need praise at the beginning. They need to know they've been noticed. And Miranda takes that away on purpose. This creates something in psychology called a status vacuum. That uncomfortable feeling where your place feels unstable and the only way to feel safe again is to prove yourself over and over. But here's the lesson you need to take from this. If someone intentionally withholds praise or acknowledgement, even when you know you've earned it, that's not a challenge. That's not motivation. And it's definitely not a game you should want to win. Working harder won't change it. Going further won't prove anything, because this isn't about merit. It's about control. They're withholding validation on purpose, pushing you to overextend, overperform, and eventually burn out just to earn something they never planned to give. So stop right there. The moment you recognize that pattern, you step out of it. Not by trying harder, but by choosing not to play. However, not all of us are motivated by praise and recognition like Andy, and Miranda sees through that as well. That is why Miranda doesn't motivate everyone the same way. Emily, Nigel, Andy. She manipulates each of them differently by dangling exactly what they're wired to want. In CIA, there's a simple framework used to understand what really motivates human behavior, even in high-stakes situations. It's called RICE: reward, ideology, coercion, and ego. These are the 4 primary motivators that can influence people's decisions, sometimes without even realizing it. Reward is the most obvious one. Money, gifts, promotions, access, opportunities. Anything that says, do this and you'll gain something. Ideology is about belief. Feeling like you're a part of something bigger, a mission, a worldview. It's when work stops being just a job and starts feeling meaningful. Coercion is pressure, fear of loss, fear of consequences, threats, direct or indirect. It's motivation driven by what happens if you don't comply. And ego is identity, pride, competence, recognition, the need to feel capable, respected, and irreplaceable. Most people are primarily driven by one of these, sometimes 2. And once someone understands which one matters most to you, they understand how to influence you. That's why this framework matters. Because influence doesn't start with control. It starts with knowing what you care about most. Most people are driven primarily by one of these. And once you identify which one dominates, influence becomes easy. Emily is reward-driven. She wants Paris. She wants the access, the proximity to power, and the life that comes with it. Nigel is ideology-driven. Fashion isn't just a job to him. It's identity, belonging, loyalty to a world he loves. Andy, on the other hand, in the beginning, is ego-driven. Not ego in the loud sense, ego in the psychological sense. Identity, competence, self-respect. She cares about one thing, not being underestimated. And eventually, Miranda sells her on ideology as well. But here's the pattern people miss. Miranda never actually gives them what they want. Emily never gets Paris. Nigel never gets the job he believes he's earned. And Andy never gets the recognition she's chasing. And that's not coincidence. That's the strategy. Because once Miranda figures out what motivates each of them, she doesn't reward it, she dangles it. Paris becomes leverage to get Emily to do everything. The job becomes leverage for Nigel. Recognition becomes leverage for Andy. And here's the part you need to understand. Manipulators don't control you by force. They control you by information. They ask questions, they observe reactions, they notice what information complements, lights your eyes up, and what hurts when it's taken away. And the moment someone knows what truly motivates you, that becomes your pressure point. That's why one of the most important rules is this: never reveal your trump card to the wrong person. Never let someone know exactly what you're chasing, what you're afraid of losing, what you're willing to overextend for. Because once that information is in the wrong hands, it stops being motivation and becomes control. And you wouldn't know it unless it's too late. And here's how you tell the difference. Motivation rewards growth. Manipulation keeps the reward just out of reach. So, if someone knows what drives you and uses that knowledge to push you harder while withholding the very thing you've earned, that's not a challenge. That's a red flag. And that's exactly what Andy eventually sees. At the end of the movie, Andy quits because she finally understands the game. She watches Miranda play her final card, sacrificing someone loyal, talented, deserving, without hesitation. And in that moment, everything clicks. This was never about excellence. It was never about merit. It was never about leverage. So, when Andy quits, she doesn't lose herself. She finds herself. She realizes she doesn't need to prove anything anymore. And that's the real lesson. You can be ambitious, you can be driven, you can even play the game. But the moment you see someone using your motivation against you, you get to decide. Do you keep chasing or do you step out with your identity intact? That's the real lesson of The Devil Wears Prada. Not don't be ambitious, but Ambition without awareness will always cost you more than it gives. The goal isn't to escape manipulation. The goal is to recognize it early and decide with open eyes whether the price is one you're willing to pay. Because the moment your worth depends on their approval, you've already paid too much. And that is it for today's video. Let me know what you thought in the comments and tell me which unconventional characters you would love to see me break down next. Mindsets, psychology, or completely new perspective on a story, you know I love that. Also, can we just take a second to appreciate how the entire cast looks exactly the same 20 years later? Because honestly, it gives me so much hope. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you like the video and subscribe. I post new videos every week. And before you go, do me one tiny favor. Watch one more video from this channel. I'll leave a few on the screen. It genuinely helps, and I think you'll love them. See you soon. Bye-bye, loves.